Thank you for joining me. I was on the train the other day listening to a Simon Sinek podcast. I'll put details in the comments. Um, and I heard him talk in delight about the story of Layla Algren with the guest that he was interviewing. And I thought the story was great too. And so I've since done a little bit of research into Layla. Layla Algren was a first female engineer to ever receive the Polen Prize, which I'm informed is like the Nobel Peace Prize for engineers in Sweden. Layla was an engineer who worked in the Swedish Telecommunications Authority during the 1970s. She was their first female engineer, and she was a real pioneer. At the time, all telephone companies in Europe and in the States were in a competitive race to develop the technology that would enable the shift from the old rotary dial telephones to phones that could be used on the move, what would become mobiles. But then I guess they were looking for car phones, really. So much of the infrastructure at the time was in place. They could see how the technology would work. Sweden had already built a number of cellular towers around Stockholm that the phones could be connected to. But there was one problem, and they couldn't seem to overcome it. That is until Layla came along. So if you're able to cast your mind back to the old rotary phones, how they worked. So you'd pick up the receiver, you'd wait for the dialing tone, and then you'd start dialing your number. And that would take a while because you had to dial each number individually in turn. And the problem was that when you did this in a moving car, a building may get in the way, which would cause you to lose the connection to the cellular tower, or you may drive between two towers and again lose connection between one to the other. And this would mean you'd have to hang up and start the whole process again. Wait for the dialing tone, dial, 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 dial. Not ideal. And they struggled with this problem for some time. But it was Layla who found the solution. And once understood, as with many good ideas, it was a really simple solution, but it required someone to come at the problem from a different angle. So rather than speeding up the dialing process, which is what people were trying to do, Layla discovered that you could store the number in a microprocessor, which in itself was new technology at the time. And this way you could dial the whole number first and then pick up the receiver and send the whole number in one go. Thus you wouldn't lose the connection whilst you were dialing between numbers. So Layla built a prototype and then drove around Stockholm all weekend with a colleague testing her idea. And we know her idea worked because it seems so obvious to us now. And we all utilise this approach multiple times every day. But it was a breakthrough, and it was the birth of modern mobile telephony. At On Track Learning, we really love to solve our clients' problems through learning, and we love to find simple and easy to use ways to provide great learning outcomes that engage the learner and are cost effective for the employer. So one example of this is our mobile training unit, Colin, which stands for Compliance Online Training in Situ. We developed Colin for a client that was sending all their staff on 3 days of annual training every year, and who then had to backfill those staff probably with overtime when they were out on training. So the cost was quite significant. But we broke all three courses down, first aid, lifting and hoisting, epilepsy medication, into their component parts and created a program of online learning that covered the knowledge, the theory and the understanding. And then we turn up in Colin, which is a retired ambulance with a bed in it, and we turn up in each of their individual sites, and we undertake in-person practical assessments and sessions to ensure that learning that they've learned online can be applied and assessed and used in practice. It's far easier for the learner. They don't have to travel out to centres, and hugely cost effective for the client. So like Layla, we were looking to deliver our mobile solution. I love those stories. Thank you very much.